Welcome back to this week's episode of Copy That. My name's Chili D and we've got Josh behind the lens. In this week's episode, we're joined by a very talented and acclaimed filmmaker, Mr. Randall Wood. I met Randall around 3 years ago and was immediately taken aback by his kind nature and ability behind the lens. He has an amazing ability to not only capture Earth's beautiful moments, but at the same time to inspire those around him. With over 25 years' experience with writing, directing and shooting, you have most definitely seen one of Randall's films. He has won numerous awards for his work, including the Dead Deer Award at the Sydney Film Festival. Right now, Randall is working on a project called Flyways Film, a quest to defend critically endangered migratory birds, shorebirds to be exact, and their epic global flyways. A two-part series shining a critical lens on their survival. Hope you enjoy. I'm joined in the studio with Randall. How are you today, Randall?
I'm well, thanks, Marta, and thanks for bringing me in here. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for coming. How has the day been?
Well, it's been pretty interesting. We're just in the final throes of pre-production on our film Flyways.
Yes.
And we're negotiating with people around the world to help shoot it. So we're actually working at the moment with a team in Africa who are about to go to Africa. So we're just...
My motherland.
Yeah, well, down at Mauritania. So we're just preparing a group of filmmakers and scientists who are working together to shoot part of our film.
Before we get into the film, I wanted to do a little backstory for our viewers and our listeners. You're in Brisbane now, but you weren't always in Brisbane because you did a little bit of time in Sydney and at different places. How have you found yourself back in Brisbane?
Well, as a filmmaker, I've got to say most of my life has been travel, and that's been really exciting. So I've lived in lots of other places. Like I lived in Amsterdam for a while, and London and Sydney and Costa Rica for bits and all sorts of different places. But I kind of come back to Brisbane partly because I love it, partly because my family here, partly because I built a house here when I was very young. And I've planted a lot of trees there that need tending and looking after. So there's I think there's always a pull back to the place you grew up in.
Yeah.
And Brisbane's just beautiful. It's vastly underrated part of the world, I think.
Definitely, yeah.
And not so much, the city is gorgeous in its own way. But what I most love about Brisbane is the nature areas around Brisbane. I love Moreton Bay just dearly with all my heart, and I love the mountains, the Diagula Range, the rainforests. I mean, we live truly in one of the most beautiful parts of the world.
Definitely. So you mentioned the property that you have and you're working on at the moment. That's in Closeburn, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So how did you come to sort of start up shop there?
Well, actually, it's a family farm. So
Nice.
It's where I grew up, and when I was 14, I started building a house there, and which sounds crazy, but it took me. I've really worked on and off on it all my life. It's a little bit of a lifetime story.
14.
Yeah, I'd start digging a little hole in a cliff and basically built I had this vision. I wanted to build a pyramid in the same like orientation and in the same dimension as Giza.
Okay.
So I sort of got stuck into it, and by 16 I'd built that pyramid. It took a year to excavate the site and a year to build the stone foundations. And then the pyramid was built, and it's kind of evolved from there.
It's amazing. 16-year-old Randall with a pyramid in his backyard. That's pretty amazing.
It's a little bit unconventional, I get that. But it was a bit of a passion.
So I guess I've sort of gathered from a young age you were inventive, creating, envisioning your future.
I suppose so. I was lucky that I studied music at the conservatorium, and that really changed my life, I think, for the better. It taught me kind of a lot about discipline, but also just about the power of sound and I suppose temporal arts, like arts that move through time. Like I really discovered through music that I really love story. And because I started writing music for short films, and writing music for short films just got me into making short films.
Yeah,
and
nice.
I never really went back to being a composer, although I would like to. I started making documentaries because I suppose I saw that documentary has been a way you could change, in some ways, dialogue around issues that matter. Or not change so much, but rather just bring up questions, which I think is what filmmaking is all about.
More thought-provoking. And But what's sort of bubbling under the surface there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thanks.
The power of film is undeniable, and with all its creations of life, this can be either be good or bad. How have you decided to do good with the films that you make?
Well, I know not everyone agrees with this, but I don't personally watch horror films.
Okay.
I've decided that for me, filmmaking...
Too scary? Or?
No, I just don't want to put I personally have decided quite early on in my life that I wanted to invest my energy in filmmaking that would be for good.
Yeah.
And for me, just like I'm not really interested particularly in exploring psychoses or horror, but I do like exploring what makes us better people, what makes what kind of perhaps changes our relationship to the world in some way. And most recently I've just become passionate about exploring films that explore issues around ecology and biodiversity and our relationship to nature, because I think as humans that is the one thing that matters most on the planet right now.
Yeah,
biodiversity.
Definitely.
And loss of biodiversity right now is the biggest issue, I think, facing the chances of humans actually living onward and onward through multi-generations. We need animals as much as animals need us, more than animals need us, in fact.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting from a young age when we're taught about animals and sort of the hierarchy that is the animal kingdom, immediately are put on the top. Humans are on the top. Instead of this web that we are really all interchangeable and like connected to each other, and we should be focusing on that connectedness and rather than who's on top and who the predator is.
And I think if you looked at First Nations people around the world and took the Roman Catholic Christian scenario out of the equation, you'd find, generally speaking, there's much more appreciation for biodiversity and for the web and respect and totem and place. I think Catholic and Roman Catholic Christianity really plugged that idea of dominion, and actually I think it's really screwed us up right now.
Yeah, it has screwed us up. Yeah. So the film you're working on at the moment, Flyways.
One word.
Never heard of it. What does it mean?
So flyways are the vast corridors across the planet that birds fly, migratory birds. They're actually like superhighways. So they're literally they're invisible superhighways that birds fly. There's 9 main flyways in the world.
Okay, so they've mapped those 9 out.
Yeah, there are 9 significant ones. There are a number of smaller ones, but there are 9 big ones. We're making here in Australia. We're a part of a flyway called the East Asian Australasian Flyway.
Okay.
And the East Asian Australasian Flyway is the biggest and most significant in the world. And we in Australia are at the end of that flyway, so at the southern tip. If you start going north and follow the paths of birds, it's just the most incredible thing to look at.
As in we're in the end, as in they stop off here?
They stop off here. Right here in Moreton Bay, there are 36 species of birds that kind of basically touch down and say, okay, I've had enough, I'm going to stop and eat and stay the summer. Yeah, so they fly all the way. Many birds fly all the way from Alaska, from Mongolia, from Siberia, remote places like Taimyr Peninsula, or and other places. I mean, it's incredible the journeys they take.
That's amazing.
Absolutely incredible. Yeah.
So with your sort of work that you're doing at the moment, this project, you've been traveling a lot and filming. COVID sort of upset that a little bit, not so much.
No, significantly.
Yeah.
So COVID has thrown a sort of year-long spanner into our production process. So we're actually a year behind now. Maybe for the better, because I think in the end it's going to be a better film, but it's taken us a year extra and a lot more money. We've had to raise a lot of additional money to cover the cost of what COVID's costing us. I mean, we're filming all around the world, and yes, I was traveling a lot with the project, and I was going to shoot this film myself all around the world before COVID hit. We were literally just a few weeks away from taking off to Chilewa to film when COVID struck, and so we had to pull everything back, rethink the film, rewrite the script, approach
so not a little
financiers.
bit, a big bit.
No, it was massive.
Yeah.
So here we are, just over a year in, and we are pushing into production now, but we're doing it with crews around the world. So we have literally next month a crew in Africa, filming in Mauritania, shorebirds, and a story about a man who's basically following the red knot, which is a beautiful bird that flies all the way from Mauritania up through Europe, France, Netherlands, Wadden Sea, and then all the way up to Taimyr Peninsula in the most remote, incredible
How would he
part of Russia.
follow them? He'd be just stopping off each time the bird stops off, he'll stop off.
Well, our story is the story of scientists trying to save birds, birds, because they're deeply under threat. So they're nearing, many of them are right on the absolute razor's edge of extinction. So he's following the birds using satellite tracking technologies, and most of the scientists do that. So basically what they do is they attach on the bird's leg or a band, a coloured band, and that gives us kind of visual information. On the back they can put a harness, and the harness has got basically a radio, either a radio transmitter or in some cases, or actually it's got a GPS and a kind of satellite transmission device that actually transmits data up to satellites, including the International Space Station now.
Wow.
It's amazing. It's incredible.
Did you know anything about birds before?
I've been interested in birds for a while, but I didn't know anything about shorebirds.
Okay,
I just got sort of, I suppose I got drawn in because here in Brisbane, you probably know about it, down at Moreton Bay, at Cleveland, there's a place called Toondah Harbour.
Yes, I have heard of it.
And Toondah Harbour is like the most extraordinarily important place as far as shorebird habitat goes. And I had heard from a friend who works in environmental law that basically that there was an area down there that was being taken potentially by developers to build a 3,600 condominium development right on top of the Far Eastern curlew's habitat.
Wow.
And if you don't know it, Far Eastern curlews are the biggest shorebird in the world. They fly all the way from here to Mongolia, North China, Russia, and back again each year. So this humongous journey, and they're critically endangered. So to find out that this landscape was about to basically be decimated, the very place that they fly all the way from Mongolia to come and touch down and feed, critical feeding habitat for a bunch of units, to me kind of sounded preposterous, especially because it was a protected area. It was protected by treaty, by the Ramsar Treaty, which protects areas like it all around the world because they're seen to be critically important habitat stopover points for birds.
The survival of that bird is very much dependent on those ecosystems existing.
Absolutely critical. And the Ramsar Treaty was about basically providing a series of protections for the birds in different countries across the region. Yeah. It's like a chain, and a chain can only be as strong as its weakest link. So when a link breaks, there's a problem for the bird. And so actually for us, we thought, well, Moreton Bay seems like a bit of a weak link if the government can't even look after the one little bit of habitat we've been required by treaty to take care of.
Protect, yeah.
What happened is that the government got a grant, what am I talking about? They got money given to them by Walker Corporation, as far as I understand, from what I've read. 1 month later, they basically excised this area of land from protection, and under the pretense that this land was basically, the development of this harbour was in the national interest. Why would 3,600 units built by a private developer on critically endangered shorebird habitat be in the national interest? I mean, it's an absolute scandal. So anyway, that was the trigger for me.
Yeah, okay.
That was the trigger, a local trigger, which kind of led to a journey of discovery. And we started I wrote a script. I went on a research trip. I went to Russia. I met the top scientists all around the world in Russia, in America, in China, and in Netherlands, in Europe, in England. And even in Central America, Panama. And I came back and we put together a treatment, and we've now sold the film all around the world to broadcasters as in pre-sale, and they're supporting basically the production, which we're going into shortly. So we're not just telling the story of our critically endangered Far Eastern curlews. We're telling stories of many of the world shorebirds, like the Hudsonian godwit in the Americas, like the spoon-billed sandpiper, which comes down through China. There are only 200 of those left in the world, 200 breeding pairs left.
200 left.
That's how rare they are. And we're also telling this...
Sorry to interrupt,
No,
but you're
okay.
speaking to many scientists, I'm guessing, around the world.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Any of them sort of that you've really stuck with you since you've been filming?
Yeah, they all do in a way. I mean, here in Australia, we're working with a lab called Fuller Lab at Queensland University. They are just a wonderful, wonderful group of dedicated scientists, local UQ scientists with connections all around the world, PhD students from all around the world. They're an extraordinary bunch of people. And they're basically pursuing a number of amazing expedition-based projects. So we're following Fuller Lab, for instance, as they map using artificial intelligence, our flyway, the East Asian Australasian flyway, and the path of the curlew all the way from Moreton Bay right up to northern China and back again. And on the way, they're basically...
an amazing journey.
Yeah, it's incredible. So on the way, this group are mapping where they go using this incredible new technology that's been developed by this lab called INRA in Toulouse, a French group. Okay. So what they're doing is using artificial intelligence and taking data. I don't want to get boring, but basically information from...
No, it's not boring. It's very interesting. It's a lot of new words for me, that's for sure. I mean, my understanding is, yes, ecosystems are being destroyed. We need to protect the birds. But it's really sad to think that the protections that we have in place are so easily just discarded, as if they didn't mean anything in the first place. It's quite worrying to think that you can have these heritage sites or protected sites, but when it comes down to it, money does sort of dictate whether or not these sites are destroyed or protected.
Well, it does for good and for bad. I mean, at the same time that we've basically seen the government try to excise our critically endangered shorebird habitat from Ramsar Treaty protected status, in China, they've actually declared similar areas World Heritage status. They've given them World Heritage status in just the last 2 years.
Yeah, makes
I mean,
no
it just
sense.
shows just how significant this is, and what is going on in Australia that we're not thinking about that. I mean, why aren't people rising up in arms and going, this is not good enough?
It needs to be
Like,
a
what do we
global
care
movement
about?
as well.
It is a global movement.
Yeah.
We're part of the global
Yeah.
movement. We need to recognise as Australians that we have a part to play in a global movement, and that's what I think the story is about. This story is about like the passion we need to have for our responsibility and the part we play in a community, in a world community, and what we can do about it. Because actually, it's not for governments to take these decisions. These are our decisions to take in
Definitely.
a democracy. These lands are ancient traditional lands that deserve protections. It's we are custodians of land, and we need
Definitely.
to take our responsibilities seriously as citizens of a country.
One of the conversations we had a bit about the work that you're doing at the moment was some of the things that we can do to help. You did mention some simple things that we could do every day as just sort of civilians about perhaps not taking your dog out on the beach. What are some other tips that you could give to the people so we can help protect collectively these shorebirds?
Yeah, so for people who don't know it, shorebirds can only fly these vast distances because they fuel those flights. And in fueling those flights, they have to basically eat mudflats. Are just the most incredible cornucopia of edible things. We don't see that. We look at mudflats and just think they look like flat, empty wastelands. Actually, they're just teeming with life.
Yes, amazing.
Like, so much life. And in fact, I was filming just a couple of weeks ago over at Amity Point, and I just left the camera rolling for a while on the mudflat. And I came back to the edit suite later and I looked at the footage and I sped it up, and I just suddenly realised the whole thing is just turning over with literally millions of crabs. Just looked incredible. So, you realise when you see that kind of thing just how rich these areas are. So these birds need to fuel. So what happens is that any interruption to them fueling up for these massive flights profoundly affects their capacity to fly those flights. Like, they can't make their destination if they don't have enough fuel.
Yeah.
What happens is they have to eat a lot, they build up a lot of fat and muscle, and then they start flying, and they fly sometimes many days non-stop, sometimes up to 9 days non-stop, because they can't glide, they've got a flap. So they fly so hard and so fast that actually en route, they're once they deplete the fat stores, which are the main part of fuel, they start to digest their body. They literally start to digest their heart and other critical organs.
Digest their organs?
They literally start to digest their organs.
So they start to eat themselves, essentially?
Yeah, they start to digest themselves to basically get enough fuel to keep going.
Mid-flight?
Mid-flight. But let me come back to why this is significant.
Yeah,
and this is what I was going to... This
amazing.
whole point is about dogs, right? So, you might think that your dog chasing a shorebird down a beach isn't significant, but actually what scientists all around the world are realising is what it does is it stops them eating and it exhausts the birds, because this happens over and over again. They don't get enough energy and fat supplies to actually make these flights happen, and they can basically bomb out part way. So actually controlling dogs on mud flats is really important, because it's actually about ensuring that birds will make the route, the flight. Yep.
So yes, did you hear? Yeah. Leash up your dogs, please. I didn't know that, but I mean, it's great sort of knowledge to have, and I'm sure people who don't do that aren't trying to intentionally harm shorebirds, but just know that that little sort of leash that you can have on your dog will drastically change their journey. And save them from having to digest their own organs. So just think about that the next time you got your dog out on the beach or on the mud flats.
And the other, there's so many great things people can do for ecology, but for shorebirds, one of the things you can really get into if you're kind of into birds is get into this amazing program you can download on your phone called ebird.
ebird. Okay.
eBird's like run by Cornell University, and it's a kind of brilliant program that lets you basically identify birds and see where other people have identified birds, and you can upload that information. Like, okay, I saw a curlew down at Wellington Point, and you put that in and it goes bang, it goes up into the web. So what's happening now is that scientists are using this ebird data
Okay.
From this program, ebird, and they're using that data to kind of collate a much, much, much clearer picture of where birds go and how they get affected in the places they go. And so that data is just like, that's why the INRA lab who I was talking about in Toulouse, who are collaborating with CSIRO here in Australia and Fuller Lab, are using all these points of data that people all around the world are uploading from like just normal people like you and I. And they're using that data, and from that data they're able to basically anticipate for the first time ever, not just where birds are going, but how many birds are going there.
Yeah, it's important data.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, because that kind of data changes policy. So we know, like for instance, I mean, we wouldn't know the importance of Tunda Harbour if it wasn't for this data. Like it's only through information and science that we get to understand what's affecting the world, and we can start then to take action. Definitely. We can start to change policy. We can start to
take ownership of these things too. Yeah, and I love what you're doing. It's amazing, and like to think that little trigger has sort of shaped a lot of the last couple of years of your life is so beautiful. You've dedicated so much time and like money and just your expertise to the cause of these birds, and it's really beautiful, Randall, and you should be super proud of yourself.
Thanks, Marta. Yeah, I've got to say I'm proud of the team I work with. I've just worked with the most incredible people. I mean, I've got a fabulous team, producers team like Rebecca McElroy and Aileen Jacques. I mean, and overseas we're working with a company called Zed in France, and we've got a co-production partner in Taiwan. Wow. We're working with people in China and all over the place. A global story, Yeah, so it really is. So I'm glad to have a great team. Yeah. You know, it's and you know, I just think it is important. I mean, every film we make is like doing a PhD. Yeah. You know, or more. You know, it's quite an undertaking. I mean, the last film I made with the team was a film on innovation in condom design.
Okay, interesting. Innovation in condom design.
Yeah, which was a film that we made based on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation quest to design a better condom around the world. Okay. So, you know, it was another science-based film, but it was a film that basically looked at what, you know, if you want to talk environmental policy or kind of improving the world, maybe we can talk about family size and population. Just the kind of choices people make around how many people they're going to bring onto the planet and whether they've even got that choice. So
definitely,
that was an interesting project, and also just choice around people protecting themselves, because as you probably know, like STDs and STIs are just phenomenal around the world, and having people have the right to basically protect themselves against sexually transmitted infection is a life or death decision in a lot of places. So that was another science film that, just like this shorebird film, was 2 or 3 years in the making and a full commitment. Yeah.
Interesting. How does one find the Flyways project when it does come out?
Yeah, so it'll be here in Australia on the ABC, but actually most importantly, we're making a feature film. Yeah. So it'll be in cinema. So if everyone keeps an eye out for Flyways when it comes out in Australia, it'll be both on the ABC, but it'll also be in cinema.
We'll be sure to post about it as well.
Yeah, thanks. And if you're overseas, it'll be on Smithsonian Channel in America. It'll be on Taiwan Public Broadcasting in Taiwan. It'll be on Arte in France. So, you know, there are a bunch of international places to see it as well.
Cool. Yeah. And I just wanted to touch a little bit on, because I met you about 3 years ago, and you invited me out to have a little sail trip with you on your boat. I wanted to just talk about a little bit about how living on a boat has, how are you finding it and how has it changed? I mean, I know you have that place at Closeburn, but I know from my time spending a little bit of time on boats, it's quite difficult, and although it's beautiful, it does take a lot of effort just to get in and out, just like one part of getting on the boat. How have you found it working, filming, travelling with the boat? Yeah,
so the boat, living with a boat and on a boat and basically being a custodian of a boat, I feel like it owns me, I don't own it. It's quite a challenge at times, but it has its rewards. I mean, one of the ironies of boats is that, you know, you need to be inside one. But and so it's very, very small inside a boat in a lot of places. But of course, the boat is also about freedom and open space. So you've got this crazy contrast between being in vast open spaces and being in the most incredibly tight spaces you could ever imagine yourself ever being in, ever. So, you know, I kind of love it. I mean, I've sailed my boat from North Queensland down to Sydney and up to Brisbane, and recently I've been sailing around Moreton Bay using it as a base to film the shorebirds.
Yeah, so that's been going well. Like, it's very advantageous, I guess, to the project you're working on at the moment.
So incredible.
You're just grabbing the dinghy and you know, you can get to wherever you need to go to pretty easily.
Yeah, we're really going to some places people maybe wouldn't normally go to.
Exactly.
And we're getting to see some things that are absolutely beautiful. So last weekend we were over at Amity Point, for instance, and there's the most incredible mudflat there, and we were able to basically look across at just like beautiful flocks of Far Eastern curlews across the way. Yeah, so the boat's beautiful. I mean, a boat is not without its challenges, and it would, if I didn't do all the work myself, it'd be formidably expensive. But being a freelance doco maker, often you live kind of like on the smell of an oily rag. So, so I kind of like I look after the boat well, but I do a lot of the work myself, and that's what makes it possible.
Yeah.
A boat doesn't need to be too expensive. It can be okay if you're prepared to put it up effort.
Yeah. No. Definitely. Definitely. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining.
It's such
Copy
a pleasure.
That. It's so lovely to have you, and it definitely inspires me to do more, and hopefully it will inspire all our listeners, because I believe that if you can just change one person's like sort of mindset around something, then you've really made a real difference in the world. And I wanted to say thank you on behalf of everyone. Yeah,
thanks. And I just want to say, ultimately, I think great films are about not just providing answers or telling people what to think. They're about raising questions. So I hope that the films that we make and continue to make will just raise questions. Get people thinking, get people talking. There's no one truth. It's that there are many truths, and it's good to basically explore all the different nuances.
Yeah.
Let's get into the grey as well as the black and white.
Let's start raising some questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Randall.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me in.
No, thanks for coming. And
thanks, Mother.
Hope you enjoyed, guys.
Cheers.